Welcome to this podcast, Holistic Creators, where we share our unique and universal stories about shaping the future for the 4 Ps: people, planet, purpose, and profit. My name is Swanette. I'm a mental coach and your host of this show. My intention for this show is to inspire you on your path to a holistic future. So welcome. Welcome to my podcast, Holistic Creators. My name is Swanette and I'm your host. Today my guest is Clifton. She believes that fostering the power of connection to source, self, and service is what facilitates life's flow. She thrived through several mysterious health issues, left a successful 6-figure corporate career, and embarked upon entrepreneurship, all in ways that leave most people scratching their heads. What Christine came to realize was that the way she navigated her work and life purpose was her unique superpower. She learned to connect within herself in order to make choices that served her, even though they didn't make sense to herself or others. She is a work-life freedom guide, an engaging speaker, a 3-time author, a Mini Cooper owner, and is owned by 2 michevious feline brothers, Mr. Big and Little Mister. So come to my show.
Thank you. Yes, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
So this is already interesting to hear that you have 2 boys, and I'm kind of the owner of my cats. So this sounds kind of the same.
Familiar. They allow us to live with them.
So let me know a little bit about what you have been through that brought you to the position you are in right now, and to understand a little bit what has been your life experiences, your struggles, so that the audience can connect with your history, with your story.
Sure, I'm happy to share. There's probably 2 big chunks of them. One is my work history, and one is my health odyssey, as I like to call it. So with my work, I started out like many people do, going to college, starting a regular job. I spent 20 years in management positions, and at the end of my last position, it was temporary, so I knew it was going away, and the company wanted me to take a particular position. And there was something so strong inside of me, like constricting my heart, that I had to listen to it. I can't say that I'd ever felt that strongly before. And the other thing was that the company was saying things and doing things that didn't sound right to me. I was in a sales position, but before I had been in human resources, so I knew how temporary positions worked. And they weren't treating me like I knew our company policy was written, because I had been in HR before. So there was a lot of things that felt out of alignment. Now, that's the word I use today. I didn't know what was happening at the time. I just felt this constriction. That's the best way I can describe it. And so I pushed back to the company, got what I wanted, which was a severance package, and I leapt into my first entrepreneurship, which was a coaching practice for women with chronic illness. At the time, I had been dealing with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and I wanted to reach other women who were dealing with that. So that was my first entrepreneurship practice, and that's taken on several iterations as well over the years. I've been 15 years in entrepreneurship now. And that path in entrepreneurship is not much different than my path in my corporate career, where I would take on something and get really good at it and knew what I liked and what I didn't. And my next thought was, well, what could I do that does more of the things that I like and less of the things I don't like? And so I just continued to, and I get another position and I would learn and grow. And I, at some point, would find myself asking myself that question. So it wasn't, I didn't set career goals for myself. I didn't say I want to be in X position, it was me moving along with the organic nature of how my work and my life, was unfolding. And so again, the same was true with my entrepreneurship. Now, when I leapt into entrepreneurship, I'll say that I'm a late spiritual awakening kind of bloomer, a late bloomer. So it was really that point of leaving corporate and into my first practice that I was really beginning to gobble up all things spirituality, metaphysics, that type of thing. And so I went down this new road of entrepreneurship. My success is my naivete. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I hit major money troubles my first 3 to 5-ish years in business. And we're talking fetal position on the floor moments, like curled up, wondering how the heck I was going to pay bills the next day. And like everything else, somehow I was able to listen or follow the prompt that I was feeling to get help or make some decision that helped things. And so as I looked back on how I navigated corporate, how I've navigated entrepreneurship up till now, that's the inner guide, the intuition, what I call now my connection to the source of my understanding, which is a little different than metaphysics in my world. I was able to continually connect to that, even though I didn't know that's what I was doing. So that's my philosophy now, is that we do things and are successful sometimes unconsciously because we're doing them unconsciously. And when we can consciously recognize what we're doing, we can harness it, even greater. And so, as I mentioned, one was work, journey, the other was health. And so I went through these periods of having these chronic illnesses that were just stumping the doctors. Some doctors told me it was all in my head. Some doctors said there's nothing you can do. You have to live with it. I was having muscle pain, joint pain, fatigue, gastrointestinal issues, like major problems. And so I would move through each one. I'd get a nutritionist to help me with my GI problems. Again, it was this intuitive path. And so there'd be periods where I felt well and periods that I would feel less well. And when I would encounter something in the traditional medical industry, in the U.S., it's not the greatest, I'll have to say, that's probably being generous. I would always question what I heard because it didn't make sense to me a lot of times what they were saying, not just the gaslighting when they told me it was all in my head, but some of the things that they were telling me to do, it just didn't feel right to do. And so again, I would go down my own path. And so just about 2.5 years ago, maybe just 2 years ago now, I was finally diagnosed after 20 years of chronic illness with the illness that was causing all of that in the 20 years prior. And it's a genetic abnormality that I have called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I self-diagnosed. It was me who found all the clues, pulled them together, tried to make sense of them, find support groups of people who knew more than the medical industry knew. And I assembled these clues and then finally went to a geneticist. I paid out of pocket because the medical industry wouldn't pay for that because they just, shooed me away. So I just paid full pay out of pocket. And the geneticist within 20 minutes said, yes, you have this thing. How could you not know you had this thing? And I said, well, I've had doctors explicitly tell me that I couldn't have this thing. So with a genetic abnormality, it poses a unique situation on a human because it's your genetics. And so there's a whole body of work, Bruce Lipton, whatnot, about changing your genes. I'm not quite there yet, but I know that part of that journey through the health issues were not only similar approaches that I used in my work life and my life, but that also were I call it the compost pile of life. Because when we go through, stuff, it gets all thrown in the same pile, but that compost pile fertilizes, right, what comes next. So we get to honor it, even though it was trial and tribulation, and it helps inform everything that I do, up till even today. So that's just a picture of kind of those two big things that I have been making my way through.
I totally love this idea of the compost pile, because this is so great to understand, that we have been through struggles and our experiences, and from that it kind of composts and creates something new, and we start to flourish in this area, and when we becoming not only the seed that is watered, but really flourish by our experiences. So this is really a great picture you just gave.
I'm glad you like it.
So coming back to the first moment, you said that you had this feeling in your stomach or in your gut that something was not the right anymore being in the corporate world. So what I hear at the moment is that a lot of people telling me, we want to go out of our normal business job. We are so kind of bored, or no, we don't have the same mindset anymore. Something is different now. I want to create something for myself, like becoming an entrepreneur. So this moment from, first of all, getting this feeling or something is not in alliance with me anymore, and then really stepping out of that. What do you think people need to make the step?
Yes, there's a traditional way and probably my way, which wasn't traditional, and everybody needs to find their own way is what I like to say it. So my way wasn't traditional because even though I wrote a business plan, I knew what I was going to be doing in terms of service offerings. I dramatically underestimated the time that it was going to take to build the community around me that I would need to begin to fill my coaching practice. And so that put a major drain on my money because I wasn't working. And so if I were to then go back and advise people who are considering this, whether you're, spiritually inclined or not, it is to, when you do your budget, to really add on and be realistic about how long it might take to build that community. If I had it to do over again, I would have spent a couple of years building the community while I was still in corporate, so I would have something to step out into. So I didn't do that. My network was my corporate colleagues and, maybe customers, if you even want to reach that far. So when I stepped into entrepreneurship, it was like stepping into, the Wizard of Oz. I mean, I had no idea how to behave, where to go, that type of thing. So I would say definitely, if you can, begin building the community before you leave. The other thing is that if you talk to 5 different people, they'll give you 5 different answers about like choosing a niche or exactly, who's your tribe. And I'm a both and kind of gal. So I like both the practical as well as the spiritual. And I believe that if we're listening to that call to service by leaving a traditional role and stepping into a business we want to create, that we get to give credence to that impulse or that calling, again, like my intro said, even if it doesn't make sense to me or others. And there are the practical things that can be done as well. So having a sense of really who you want to serve in general, what kind of work you want to do. One of the things I would have done differently if I knew then what I knew now is that I wouldn't stretch so far out of my lane in order to serve people as I did. So I just wanted to help, and people would ask me if I could do something, and I could do it, even though it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And so there's that you might call it a lack mentality, because at the time I'm like, I just need money as well. Like there's a practical, like I have to put food in my refrigerator. But now that I have developed those spiritual beliefs as well, and that if I'm following my soul's calling, then I get to trust that the resources are going to appear. My belief now is that once you make a decision and you step into action, the resources will appear. Where traditional thinking will say, make sure you have $1 million in your bank account, before you do something like this, or they set down these real pragmatics. So again, I'm a both and kind of person. So that's one thing that I might have done differently. But what I have found for me in my business is that I don't attract a demographic, a geographic, or any niche like financial planners or, holistic practitioners. I attract a psychographic. And the psychographic means that it's a mindset of a person or a belief system of a person, their values, what's important to them. And I didn't know about psychographics, earlier when I left to start my own practice. So I think that is true for many spiritually led business owners, because if we're here to serve, then there's likely a mindset of a type of person that is going to be really led to follow us as well. So be aware that there isn't just demographics and geographics, but there's a psychographic as well that is likely more your niche, if you want to call it that. And that's harder to reach a psychographic than a demographic. Like I could go to the financial planners of the United States, organization and speak if that was my niche. But where do I go to find people who care about the environment or, have diversity, inclusion, and equity, equity inclusion as one of their corporate values? So it becomes a little more muddied to be able to find that kind of group. So those are the things that I would kind of say to blend both the practical as well as that soul's calling or the spiritual. But I'll also say this, don't forget to decide what lifestyle you want to live when you are working your own business or your own practice. And so some people say you have to work hard. It has to be, however many hours a week. And I'm like, who decided that? Who decided it had to be hard? So I went into it thinking I needed to make 5 cold phone calls, a day, and I had to do all this cold calling, and I was literally, I ended up burnt out and almost broke because I'm doing these things and none of them felt in alignment with who I was as a human. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a different way. And so that type of thing that I chose impacted my lifestyle. It probably added more stress, which wasn't good for my health in my case, but I was also not having the free time that I thought I wanted, or that I knew I wanted. I left corporate for the freedom. So coming back to that, decide the lifestyle that you want to live. Do you want to work 5 days a week? How many clients do you want in your practice? Do you want to eventually grow a business that you want to sell? And so all of these questions help you set things up in a way that can make you successful down the road and keep the lifestyle that you want to be living in the way that you want. Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally agree on what you're saying. And I would like to add something that if you work in a corporate business, you have your knowledge about your field, about your area you're working in. But as soon as you become an entrepreneur, there will be marketing. You already said that. No, you have to do perhaps cold calls or whatever, go on podcasts like this. You have to knowledge about taxes, accounting, whatever. And it is becoming huge. And it is not only just you need to be a good coach or good healer or therapist. you have to need to bring in all this other knowledge or buy it in. So you need more money to create, to buy services in. And don't underestimate this as well. Like, this is something that perhaps you haven't done before. And we coaches are normally not the ones that like accounting so much and doing taxes so much. Speaking from my own experience, I can do that, but it's not really my favorite. But of course, we have to do this as well, being an entrepreneur.
Oh, I agree. In my dream of dreams, I want to start a firm that's what I call a plug and play for solopreneurs who are starting their business, so they can get a little of all of those things you just described, to support them and be able to dial it up as they grow. And I think that I know that when I'm in corporate and I see like a company promotional material, I don't think about the time and effort that went into the formatting, the copywriting, choosing the colors and the photographs. And so when I start my own practice, I saw something that looked simple. I had no idea the depth and breadth of skill and time and money that it would take to produce something like that. So yeah, that's important to know that you need supported in the what I call shared services platform. This is shared service platform to get you out there. And that's part of my success. My coaching practice evolved into becoming a marketing service provider. So I would actually take your business cards from a meeting, a networking meeting, make phone calls on your behalf, book appointments for you, and then turn those over to the solopreneur, and they would show up to the appointments. And so that caught on really quickly because people hated that marketing thing, and I didn't care, but what I found is that the entrepreneurs couldn't sell themselves once they got in the appointment. So again, my practice evolved over time. My last position in corporate was a sales coach. So I started consulting and teaching entrepreneurs how to sell, how to set a sales system, how to sell themselves, what to say, and all of that being highly relational, not icky or pushy or salesy, but to do it in a very earthy, organic, in integrity way. So again, that's how, we morph over time as our evolution goes. And yeah, it's important to understand. And I'm a big fan, like you said, I love my bookkeeper. I love my accountant. That's the last thing I want to be doing is typing in transactions into QuickBooks. So honor the subject matter expert and the outsourcing that it would cost you, knowing that it buys you, let's say, an hour of your time. And if you turn that hour into a client, then you've more than paid for what it costs to bring that subject matter expert into your business. So I agree with what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, what I see is that as long as you work for a corporate, you are under that brand. But now becoming an entrepreneur, you are the brand. Like, people feel, especially the healers or therapists, that I can't sell myself. Yeah, this is like, I would like, if I could, I would do all this for free because I really want to serve the world, but how can I sell something that is me? Yeah, so I think this is also something to figure out, that we sell services. And of course, the service comes with us, it comes with our brand and how we show up in the world. But especially for spiritual people, I think this is also kind of a difficulty. What do you think about that?
Oh, well, here's my philosophy. I'd love to hear what you think about this. And again, I call myself Shirley Holmes instead of Sherlock Holmes because I'm a sleuth. I like looking at clues and piecing things together. So in 15 years of entrepreneurship and what I've observed of myself, my clients, and other people, I believe that spiritual people unconsciously choose entrepreneurship in order to heal their money story. Boom, done. Like, that's the end result. Now, the path to get there is a lot longer, but when we step into entrepreneurship, that's sometimes the first time that we're seeing and touching like every dollar that comes in and goes out. I don't know about you, but when in corporate, I had a paycheck and I had automatic, deposit into my savings and automatic deposit into 401k, and I paid for my health insurance. Like, I didn't see any of that. All I got was my net, paycheck. So I wasn't, nose to nose with the dollars that came in. So I think that's actually the case. I think that, of course, I believe that spiritual people hear a calling that not everybody does. And again, that's not right or wrong, that everybody hears a soul's calling. But when we hear it and we listen to it and we step into it, you're stepping into major personal and spiritual growth. That's really what underlies this service that you want to provide. And then offering the service, what we learn in that evolution is what is going to prepare us to really serve the world in a bigger way. So that's my belief. I think that unconsciously, as spiritual people, we choose entrepreneurship in order to heal our money story ultimately. And that's the venue, the delivery system is our business to learn that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I'm also able to look into the Akashic records and read past lives, I can see that these healers or coaches that are now in this lifetime serving humanity have had a long story of being witches or being kind of people, homeless people, or in the church like monks or whatever. So they have been in a state where they didn't need or didn't get money for their services. And so this is kind of a repetitive pattern that comes up again. And so now in this lifetime, they need to understand, okay, I have to unblock all this old pattern and old beliefs and now step into my own strength and become visible, and of course therefore getting also money for my service. Yeah.
Yes. So I've on the side built my own little money course for my clients, because it brings in a lot of principles we're talking about. But culturally, when we're in corporate, we perceive our job as being the point of creation for money. We get money from our jobs. And so we're cultured to believe that. So when we step into entrepreneurship, why wouldn't we believe that our business is what creates money? And it actually doesn't. The business doesn't create money. Source creates money. But we can lose sight of that because the attention that we end up putting on building the business, getting money coming in the door, that type of thing. So in the way that I look at things, when I said about lifestyle, I think it's important that we understand how we want to live our lives. We need to understand what our soul's calling is in this lifetime, what our values are. And all of those, I believe, fuel that intuitive connection to source that then guides us, through the world. And that's, it's similar but slightly different than the pure metaphysics of like attracts like in the universe, because that's a mechanism of action, the universe, and source is that I would call, this is my belief, like it's our spiritual DNA, right? That we're encoded, that you can't help but bring this service, into the world. So they're slightly different. But when we acknowledge that both those forces are at play, and we know that we're already whole and complete, that the universe is already, not lacking, then we can reel back the lens from our business and stop, I call it burdening our business. Stop burdening your business with the responsibility of providing for you, and instead remember that we're a particle of the divine walking the planet, and it's my being that is my compensation. Anywhere I take my being is going to generate compensation for me. And compensation doesn't mean just money. It means to be compensated for. So if I'm going to go volunteer at the local homeless shelter, just making something up, then in my belief system, my spiritual belief system, I know at some point I'm going to be compensated, whether it's a client out of the blue, or whether I find $10 on the pavement, or whether I get a tax refund when I didn't expect it. I can trust that the universe doesn't work in lack. So if something moves out, if I give something and moves out, it creates this space that must be compensated for. So something has to move into that space. So holding on to that truth is really key, I find, for spiritual entrepreneurs to remember. And like I said, my first 5 years of entrepreneurship, like I was close to filing bankruptcy 3 times in that cycle. I spent all my 401k. I cashed out all my pension from corporate. Like I did things most people wouldn't choose to do. But my calling was so strong, I knew that I needed to stick with it. And so I can now see that experience of that money, of my own money story, is now how I can help inform my clients to show them how to transform it for them. If I didn't have that experience, the compost pile, if I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't be able to serve in the way that I'm serving now.
Mm-hmm. I totally hear you. So, and I also like the idea that if you serve for free or volunteer in one area, like the source will bring you something else into your life. So at the moment, source is delivering a lot of stray cats for me, but perhaps I ask for that, I'm not sure. So what I would like to understand a little bit more is how can you balance, on the one hand, like this 3D world where you really have to do your business, and then on the other hand, being in a strong connection to source, like getting the feeling or the pictures or whatever it is, how you receive it, where you shall continue your path, like getting the soul path and the steps that you have to do, for example?
Sure. That's a great question. And I tell my clients sometimes, I'm just one big toenail ahead of them. I work these practices every day. Like no one's immune to these practices. And I'll answer your question with a real quick story, in that I serendipitously became a homeowner, believe it or not, in December. And it all just happened clickety, 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 click. And I had been hoping to build a house, and then that was too expensive for me. And so I didn't see this as an option for me, owning a house. I wanted to build, and I had a specific design that I had, made up, blah, blah, blah. Yet when it presented itself and the way things started clicking along, I could feel the energy of flow in it. Even though the out picturing wasn't what I thought what I wanted, or I thought I wanted. So the feeling of it was familiar. The feeling of flow was familiar. And so I went from spending, I'm going to call it earlier last year, 4 months attempting to find a way to build a house. And it was struggle, stop, progress, stop, all this stuff, to moving from seeing a house to buying a house in 6 weeks. That recognition of the feeling of flow. Now, I'm a kinesthetic. I used to teach swing dancing and teach fitness, so I'm really a physical kinesthetic. So I can feel that the feeling is kind of being drawn along, like if you're in an inner tube on a lazy river, kind of getting pulled. At least for me, that's the feeling. So that's one quick example. And when I stepped into all of that activity of finances, inspections, and all that, my client docket kind of cleared up. And I had all this time to do all the work that I needed to do to prep and purchase and get the floors refinished and then move into the house. So I show up in January and I'm like, I'm ready to go, ready for the docket to fill again. And like crickets are chirping, there's not much happening. And so being a human, in this 3D world, there's that that cultured angst, that cultured money angst about money not coming in. And I know I have these practices that can help me stay aligned with source, the source of my understanding. And so I'll toggle sometimes between the two, where I get it all constricted and then realize, I'm constricted. This isn't going to help me at all. Let me bring in the practices that I have, and then start working my practices. One of my money practices is I've created a magical money manifestation spreadsheet in Excel. And I don't use Excel. I hate Excel. So I knew Source was at play when it guided me to create an Excel spreadsheet, just like accounting and numbers. Like I'm like, are you serious? And it was like, yes, fill out the spreadsheet. So when I pull up the spreadsheet, it's like a dashboard. It's like a financial dashboard. And so I was able to kind of look at everything I had, and my ego, who was trying to take care of me, saw all the stuff I already have, and my parasympathetic nervous system took over, took a breath. I felt grounded. I'm like, okay, I can see I'm taken care of. Like everything's taken care of. I don't have to worry about this. Now, what I'll say is I often say that divine timing is rarely my own. Like I want things to happen, so much sooner. And so the dance between being a human and working these practices, to me, is just part of walking the planet. I'm not sure I'll ever be that cross-legged person at the top of the mountain oming, in complete connection to source, at least in this lifetime. Maybe I will. I don't know. So I just feel like those experiences are our practice. That's why they're called practices. And that if I can give myself the grace during those constriction periods and not judge myself, oh, you should have done your practices sooner, or whatever those self-judgment, self-punishment thoughts, even come in. If I can give myself grace and love on the constriction and love on the fact that I was angsting a little bit, to me, that is part of the integration, that compost pile, that if I can accept all that's happening, then that is what brings the ease and the alignment with flow. So both attachment and resistance are interrupters of flow. And if I find myself in those states, then those are signs for me to kind of, okay, let me step back into my practices so I can step back into that flow. So that's just my own quick story, that I get to trust that my docket opened up that allowed me to do all of these things. And I had time to land, get settled in, unpack, breathe, get affiliated with my new neighborhood. And now I'm ready for the next thing. So that's how I see both of those aspects kind of coming into play.
Yeah, so I totally get that. Also from my life, there are moments when I feel that I really have to do things like having my to-do list. I have to do this, and getting ready with that. And then there are moments where I feel, okay, I have to go in stillness and meditate, or just sit by the ocean, and so that I can download new things and getting in alignment again with source. So I'm kind of moving like this. Perhaps there are other possibilities, like having this at both times. For me, I can't do that. So sometimes I'm really busy, and then I'm kind of, people would say, lazy. I'm not lazy. I'm doing my inner work.
Well, the thing I say too is that when we develop our inner work or our spiritual practices, there are times when we first are learning them and we work them a little more consciously. We need to. But then there's a point at which they're second nature and they're integrated in who we are and what we do. It's kind of like learning to drive a car. When you first learn to drive a car, you're conscious of everything, the foot, the pedal, the steering wheel, and now I drive somewhere and I don't even know how I got home, right? So if we can look at that adoption of practices, that some of them are working already in the background, and that we don't always have to consciously work them in the foreground. And I think for spiritual people as well, I find this for myself for sure, and some of my clients, is that if we can recognize that we also grow through our spiritual practices. So the practices, some of the practices that I teach my clients, I no longer do because I've grown through them and I'm on to a new one. And so that is also sometimes when I find either myself or a client in a kind of a stagnant, I start looking at the practices and say, am I ready for something new now? You know, is something wanting to come into this space that's new? And that's, again, that connection with intuition.
Can you share a little bit about the practices you are teaching and, of course, you're using for yourself?
Oh, sure. Gosh, there's so many different ones. And I call myself a cherry picker, where I'll learn something from another body of work and I'll say, I like this piece of that, and I'll pick it and use it. I work, the people that get drawn to me are what I lovingly call recovering people pleasers, which is me as well. We also tend to be empaths, which lends itself, in my experience, to allowing energy hitchhikers and vampires unbeknownst to us. And so a big practice that I like to teach my clients is energy protection as well as energy clearing. And to help them understand that they can go into a situation with a heightened energy protection, but to also learn how to clear their own energy. I used to, when I first started networking, I would go to a networking event. I would come home and like sleep for 3 hours. They would just exhaust me. And then when I started understanding that I was allowing my energy to be taken from me, you know, in those events, is when I started learning different energy protection practices. So there's two that I tend to teach the most of. One is the hazmat suit. So if I'm driving up to an event, and now, by the way, this might be your family, you know, reunion, or it might be going to an in-law's house that you don't prefer, like any event that you feel like you might need to protect your energy. I park my car and I do a guided visualization of literally stepping into a hazmat suit, zipping it up, and protecting my energy before I get out of the car. So, I mean, that could take 1 to 5 minutes, depending on how quickly, you know, I move through. And another one I use is if you need more space than that, like I love going to music festivals. It's one of my favorite things, but I also like being anonymous. Like I don't need to be in the thick of it. I like to have the space around me. So I do what I call the hamster ball energy protection. So imagine a human-sized hamster ball, you know, sphere around me, and I will literally put my chair down, sit in my chair, do the hamster ball visualization, and nobody will put their chairs or blankets around me. I mean, it's amazing. But you can also do that if you're stepping into a wedding or a networking event. It just gives you a little bit more space between you and that person if you feel like you know, the other people, if you feel like you need it. Plus, I believe that source works in levity and lightness and laughter. So if we can laugh about the hazmat suit and the human hamster ball, you know, I think it just adds to its effectiveness. So those are two of the energy protection. And I know that some people use mantras for energy protection. That works as well. So one of my mentors says that all ways work. So just find the way that works for you. The energy clearing practices, I do use, there's two approaches I use. One is a prayer that a friend of mine, Jennifer Urezio, taught me. And I'll say it here if you want me to share it with the listeners. And I find it really powerful. So this is how it goes. I co-create with the divine that all things alien or conditional leave my mind, body, and spirit at once and return to its rightful place with divine love, will, and grace. So I also call myself Mrs. Seuss because I'll end up rhyming unintentionally. So the fact that prayer has some rhyme to it. So it's just really what the prayer is saying, that anything that is conditional or alien to my being, I'm sending it back to where, it belongs with love and grace. The other energy clearing practice I use is something called access consciousness, or part of a practice called access consciousness. And when you sense that you've taken on that, this extra energy, you'll make a statement out loud, like, anywhere I've taken on someone else's energy, am I ready to return it to sender now? Right? And I just made that up in this moment. So make up the statement that, anywhere I might have taken on someone else's energy, am I ready to release it or return it to sender now? And Access has an unusual mantra that you say as a clearing. And this is the mantra: good, bad, right, wrong, pod, poc, all nines, shorts, boys, and beyonds. So it sounds like gobbledygook, and it's intended to really penetrate the subconscious and go to the point of creation of that, in this case, energy attachment, and release it. It's not, unlike therapy, you don't have to go back and find where the point of creation was. You just know you have it, and you're releasing it from the point of creation. So those are two energy clearing practices I like to use.
Yeah. So this is already very interesting to understand that there is, on the one hand, energy that is pulled out of people, and on the other hand, energy that is put into us, like that doesn't belong to us. How do people can feel, and then of course decide which of the exercises you just gave are useful for them?
That's a really great question. I have them ask a simple question. What I like to do is separate myself. Like, if I'm having this feeling, I'll actually get up, go and sit somewhere different. Like, for whatever reason, that feels good to me. I'm a kinesthetic, so I think that's why that works for me. And it just puts me in a different place, and I can go, what's going on right now? So a simple question then that I ask, and I teach my clients to ask is this mine? And what I find the body does is, when the body enters a rest and digest state, meaning a calm and grounded state, and this is your parasympathetic nervous system, your body will take an involuntary deep breath. That is a sign that your body has entered a parasympathetic state. So if you're feeling that something's going on, your sympathetic is probably activated a little bit. So when you say, is it mine? And your body takes a deep breath into a parasympathetic, the parasympathetic state, then it's a sign that it isn't yours. So that gives you a clue to say that, okay, now I get to clear it. Now, if it is mine, the practices to clear it aren't going to be much different than if it isn't mine, because the difference is that if something's going on with me, and again, I'm a both and kind of person. So I'm someone who believes that emotions show themselves because they're asking to be seen. So I don't believe in bypassing emotional response, because I think it's our little selves raising its hand to say, here I am, finally time to acknowledge me. So that's the difference between if it's mine versus if it's somebody else. If it's mine, I say, oh, hello, whatever, anger, hello, fear, and I pat the seat next to me, pat the seat, come sit next to me. Like, I want to talk with you, and like really engage for a few moments with that emotion, whatever it might be. For me, that's the first step of acknowledgement, because it takes the charge out of the emotional rising that happens. And then we move on to those other practices, which is, anywhere I might be allowing I'm just going to make this up, anywhere I might be allowing a unserving belief system to bring fear into my body, am I ready to uncreate and destroy it now? And then I'll use the access consciousness practice. So it's a both and. It's acknowledging the emotion if it's yours, and moving through and shifting that energy space so that it goes on its way, and it reveals we all know there's just a next layer that's waiting for us. But it's a loving way to approach it, as opposed to saying that, oh, I have to reframe it, or I have to heal it. I think that sometimes in our spiritual and personal growth industries, that all this healing of everything also feels like a lot of work. At least for me, like when I heal this and heal that, like it's like, oh, sometimes it just feels like, heavy and burdensome. And that's why I prefer the term of integration, because it really is about reclaiming parts of me that I've put aside, whether it be a trauma or forgotten about, or, whatever the case might be. So for me, it is really about integration. And some people might argue that healing means integration. Okay, fine. So again, we all get to choose what works for us. So for me, the word integration just feels much more loving and accepting than to think, oh, I have to heal something, that there's something wrong here that I have to heal. Instead of saying, oh, let me give you a big hug so I can reintegrate you into my being, and I'm ready then to keep evolving. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so if you understand like healing is to fix it, then it becomes really like, okay, you have to work on that and fix it, and no, it is not good the way it is. And if you understand healing more like getting aware of that, embracing it and integrating that, then healing is, it's sometimes about the wording and the ideas we have about a word and our interpretation of the words, of course. Yeah, so
very true.
I use the word healing as well, but I do more the embracing and integrating than I do the fixing.
Exactly. And that's why dialogue helps, right? So if we have this platform to explain what we mean, then it helps us find that common ground. And I'm also, I love etymology of words, so the root of words. So if you look at the root of the word heal, it means whole. So of course, reintegration or integrating is, whole. If you look at the root word of wealth, the root of the word wealth is well-being. How about that, right? So I think there's a lot to be said for really understanding what we're saying, because there's a big part of my body of work is using your voice. And so words do matter, and choosing the ones that are right for you is definitely the key.
Absolutely. So what are typical challenges people do have that come to you and can contribute from your service?
It's quite varied. As I mentioned before, there's a psychographic that I attract, and there are people who I call us highly relational people who value relationships above task, above doing. And what happens with that, if we pair that with people who are called to service, that usually means the person is quite often and probably to the detriment of themselves, overstretched beyond that which they could have been that they were healthily giving. So they've overextended themselves. They're exhausted. Sometimes I attract a entrepreneur. Sometimes it might be a career person who's exhausted and burnt out from their work. But usually they come to me exhausted, burnt out, and it's because what they've done in the past isn't working anymore. And they don't know why. They're kind of stumped as to why things that worked before isn't working anymore. The other type of person that comes to me, I had several of these over the holidays, is conflicts with family members. ways to, because they were concerned about the relationship or lack thereof with a significant family member. And people who are highly relational don't always know what to say because we're afraid of offending people or coming across too strong or being rude. And what's funny is that our needle is so far into people pleasing that we don't recognize that neutral feels odd, feels rude to us, but it's what everyone else would say, but we've just bent so far this way. So those are a couple of the scenarios that come into play. And the approach I take with all of those is the same. The first thing is, who are you today? Because until we establish the place of power of ourselves and knowing who we are and what we want out of the relationship, what we want out of our job, what we want out of our career, we can't begin to address the outer, because when we shift the inner, we know the outer is going to shift. So often entrepreneurs will come to me and say, I need to learn how to sell better, or my marketing isn't working, so I need to fix that. And I can help them with that. But again, the first step is, but who are you today? What service do you really want to be offering? How do you really want to be dealing with your clients? And so many of them will think that's what they want. And within a few sessions, they can see that inner work is already transforming their business or their career. And they want to work on the inner work. They're like, forget about the marketing, forget about the sales. Like, I can see that by looking and attending to this, that this is transforming. So I'll give you a quick example. I had a client come to me in the fall, and she was just tired of her employer. The work wasn't exciting her anymore. She was burnt out. She was afraid to make a change. These are all things that come into play. And again, the first step is we went within. What do you want? What do you prefer? Who are you today? The other thing I look at, as I mentioned earlier, is lifestyle. Where do your hobbies play a role in your life in this moment? Are you connecting with your family or partner in a way that you want to? So when we look at the holistic life, we can take the burden off the career, the business, whatever, to say that, when I'm clear about this whole thing, that's when the universe can use its magical tools to look further than just what's happening in our career or job. So she was doing, I would call it grunt work at work, and she wasn't doing anything that lit her up on the side. And there's an assessment that I use with career seekers called Multiple Natures, and it helps show them the aligned careers and hobbies with them so that they can better understand what's aligned with them. And so after that inner work, she was looking for other positions, but she wasn't finding anything. So I just reached out to her a couple weeks ago, and she came back. She goes, "You're not going to believe what happened." And everyone always says that. It's the first line to the email. And I always say, "Oh yeah, I'll believe it." She said, "I got a promotion at work, doing the work that I really want to be doing. And I started tutoring with this organization," because this was her hobby. This was her missing piece of the holistic lifestyle. And she's tutoring children on Friday afternoons in a particular subject matter. And she's like, "I'm so happy. It's just so fulfilling, And so that's one just quick example that she didn't leave her job, but I can't say for sure. I'm not sure, I don't want to say it's me taking her through the inner work that got her the promotion, but the universe was clearer on her behalf because she did the inner work and she was clearer about where she was wanting to bring her talents. The other piece is understanding her soul's calling. Really, some people call it your purpose or your why. I use the term soul's calling. So I also had brought her attention, to that. And it's a beautiful example of how we're only responsible for that inner work, and then listening to the intuitive prompts to inspired action. And then, the mechanisms of action then go to work on our behalf. So that was a great story and one example. The relationship things that come to me, I teach people how to speak to each other, how to have a constructive conversation, how to understand where the other person might be coming from. Because highly relational people will get all in a bunch because they're like, oh, they don't like me, and they create these stories in their heads that may or may not be true. And so I help back them away from that, and look at things a little more objectively. And a big piece of understanding that other party is very enlightening to them, that they can go, oh, that might be what she's thinking, or that might be what she's considering. And they say without fail, Christine, I can't tell you how much more peaceful and calm my life is now that I've shifted my perspective, expectations of this person, but also learned this conversational mechanism, because I teach them a conversation method, as well as teaching them how to speak to different styles in different ways. So they have they've done the inner work, but they're also getting those outer tools, those pragmatic tools as well. And if anything, there's great success when they can bring peace and ease, more peace and ease to their lives as a result. So those are a few examples.
Yeah, wow, this is so amazing. And I can imagine that now people are interested to come in contact with you, or to figure out a little bit more about your services. Can you tell me where they can reach out to you?
Sure. The best way is my website, which is christineclifton.com. And that's kind of the portal to everything that I do. There's also a book page there where you'll see my book, but my most recent book is called Get Ready, Get Set, Flow. And it has a lot of the concepts here that we've been talking about. So that can give them a little more insight that way. And I always like giving gifts for people who've made it this far through the interview. I have a digital guidebook, and it's called Your Spirit at Work. And the subtitle is Bring More of You Through What You Do So Your Vision Comes True. And they can go to yourspiritatworkbook.com, and they can subscribe to get the digital version of that workbook. And so it really is a workbook. There's a page with instructions, and they can print off the actual worksheet page if they'd like to actually write in it. And it takes them through some of these concepts that we've talked about today.
Wow, thank you so much. I will put in the links below in the description so that it is easy for people to reach out to you just by clicking on the links. And thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, so hope to speak to you soon again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening or watching my podcast, Holistic Creators. If you want to know more about how I can help and support you, have a look at my website, spiritualchangemaker.com. You can also join my Facebook group, Spiritual Changemakers Community. Stay tuned for the next episode by subscribing to this channel. And you also can check the previous episodes.